As a principal supervisor, I am not the principal. I am the facilitator of the principal's learning. We are no longer just checking boxes off and saying, did you do this or not? But we're actually side by side with principals.
I know what it will take to move this needle on student performance, and I know that it requires that principals must be able to spend the majority of their time focused on teaching and learning. If we aren't focused on that, we'll never get the student outcomes that we want.
In Tulsa, they call their principal supervisors instructional leadership directors. Here in Washington, D.C., we call them instructional superintendents. Our instructional superintendent position is one of the most important positions in DCPS. It sits at the nexus between schools and our central strategy for educating young people. In order for instructional superintendents to really maximize teaching and learning, they can't really be responsible for anything else but teaching and learning.
So how will you show what you know about this book?
We have to read about the details first, and then we can explain it.
Over 8 years ago, our instructional superintendents were responsible for teaching and learning and school operations and school discipline, and if the boiler broke and if the parent had a complaint, and everything in the world fell on the instructional superintendent. To some extent, each instructional superintendent had their own sort of kingdom. And for some people, that was the pinnacle of management and their professional careers, but you cannot do all of those things well. And so there were some people who really were disappointed when we stripped away all of the operational things so that instructional superintendents were just focused on teaching and learning. And so over the course of a few years, we changed the way our instructional superintendents worked. We also learned over time that an instructional superintendent can only manage so many schools well. Initially, each instructional superintendent had anywhere from 22 to 30 schools. And a few years ago, we cut that ratio down so that at this point, each of our instructional superintendents has about 12 schools. And that allows the kind of constant nurturing and support and relationship building that each instructional superintendent needs to appropriately support their principals. And that's when we started to see schools soar.
The relationships that I have with all of my principals is one that spans a gamut of coaching relationship, from here's the information, this is what we need to do, to what are you thinking about and where do you want to go and what's your planning.
On a typical day, I will be in my car for about 2 to 3 hours. Right now, I really am working on trying to balance coaching and supervision. Sometimes there are just things that principals have to do, and I have to be able to give them an evaluation at the end of the day. But what I'm hoping is that I will build such strong relationships with my principals that they understand that all the feedback that I give them is about growing them.
So what might you be telling the teacher, or what might that conversation be like?
I think I would ask her first, what did she notice with the lesson and what would have made it a little richer for the kids?
She's been a mentor, a coach, an evaluator, a sounding board, a thought partner, everything all rolled into one. I couldn't imagine doing this job without that position there. My building's undergoing a lot of renovations. She and I don't talk about that. I talk to our operations person. And I think that's good because it keeps us focused. It keeps me focused on my main role, which is the instructional leader of the building.
And so what did we see in our African-American boys?
I saw engagement
in
today.
Classroom.
I know.
I know.
It was great.
The professional development that we get as principal supervisors has been key in my own growth in this role. We meet weekly. We get rich professional development. We solve problems of practice together. Instructional superintendents are playing a big role in the improvement of the school district because as a team, we are raising the bar for ourselves, and by doing so, we're raising the bar for our principals.
Having instructional leadership directors is something that's very new for Tulsa. An instructional leadership director in the Tulsa Public Schools is someone who serves a portfolio of schools and is really the instructional leader and the coach for the principal and to some extent the teachers in that portfolio. I think there's a sense of why do we need 9 instructional leadership directors if before we had just 2 associate superintendents? But when you have a chance to actually have a conversation with folks and they start to think about how unreasonable it is to think that one person would be supervising 50 people, all across a town and 50 different schools, it starts to make more sense.
It was quite a paradigm shift for our principals and our schools when we implemented instructional leadership directors. I do think it was a challenge for some of our kind of senior principals who had been around for a while in feeling that there was a loss of autonomy or that someone was intimately involved in their work. The ILD wears the hat of a coach and also the hat of a supervisor. Some of our principals had concerns about the shift to an ILD framework, and that was often voiced at first. How can I be open and honest and forthright about some of the things that I might not be doing well when in turn you're going to eventually evaluate me? And so we've really worked on having a genuine relationship where people feel safe to share their areas of growth and that the work can take place in a safe, collaborative environment.
When your coach, when your boss, when your supervisor comes to your building or sends an email that says, I want to talk to you, there's always this, oh my gosh, did I do something wrong? Did I forget to do something? What did I not do? It has been really nice, though, to be able to just open up and say, so this is where I'm really struggling. It's not evaluative. It truly is in the coaching aspect. So that has kind of taken away a lot of that fear of asking for help and not having to feel like I need to be perfect.
So for the whole group, for the math piece, what's something that you would provide as a praise for her?
Again, another management piece. She's really struggled. She's a first-year teacher, so she has struggled to get her whole group really tight so that the majority of the kids are just compliant.
I have 12 schools. I schedule a regular site visit for every school every other week for a half day for 3 hours. I visit one school in the morning and one school in the afternoon, and the principal and I spend 3 hours together doing a variety of things. We spend part of that time visiting classrooms and some of it doing some data work and maybe just some on-site professional development that's differentiated for the principal. So these would be your teachers that may have either high skill and low will or high will and low skill.
Every time my ILD comes, we look at what are the outcomes for students. I'll be honest, our days are very full with managing crisis, and sometimes those very critical conversations don't happen because we get so caught up and so busy in just managing a site as challenging as ours day to day. So having opportunities, focused opportunities with my ILD to bring that back to what's going to make the biggest impact for kids, that's huge for us. It keeps us on track.
Overall, principals need to know that regardless of what it is, if it is on their mind, if they are worried about it, don't understand it, or are just thinking of a new idea or are perplexed with something, that is something they can bring to me and talk to me about.
Being a principal can be very lonely. I believe, though, with the system that Tulsa has put in place with the IODs and the portfolios, I believe that has taken away some of the loneliness because you're building relationships with other principals. You're seeing them at least once a month.
So there are 3 here, 1 here, and 1 here. So each group can have one standard. I think instructional leadership director work can have a huge impact on how all of central office thinks about their work in support of principals as instructional leaders.
This kind of work has been such a paradigm shift for us. I think there are still those who long a little bit for the days of where we just closed our classroom door and did our thing and didn't worry about what was happening outside the classroom or outside the school building. And those days are history. Initially, when that change happens, People are startled by it, like any kind of change. But certainly what I've heard in talking with our principals is how much they are amazed by the kind of growth that they've been able to make in their own professional trajectory.
When your supervisor is in your building all the time and walking with you and experiencing challenges with you and in your teacher leadership meetings, it's a very different dynamic than the drop-by boss who comes once a month. And I think it creates a kind of partnership between our principals and our instructional superintendents that makes our principal work much stronger. They are both the keepers of the vision and the executors of the vision. They are where the magic happens.